Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We're going to sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners to hear how the camp dream transpired for them, learn from each other, and discuss some of the biggest issues in the private camp industry. My name is Howie Grossinger, and I am the co-owner of Camp Robin Hood, a day camp in Toronto, and a co-owner of Camp Walden, an overnight camp in Northern Ontario.
Hi, and I am Kelly Shuna. I am the co-owner and director of Hidden Pines Ranch Day Camp in Stillwater, Minnesota. If you're looking to find and subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at gocamp.pro/COP or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. Finally, if you're listening to this and think it would be useful to other camp owners or aspiring camp owners, please share or like or subscribe to our podcast.
Well, we'd love to now give a big shout out to our sponsor of the Camp Owners Podcast, Camp Brain. Camp Brain is camp management software which serves over 1,300 camps. They've been doing this since 1994 with 45 plus dedicated staff to meet your every need. Camp Brain builds relationships based on trust and empathy. As a long-standing Camp Brain user, I can attest to that. We have all gone through some very difficult times over the last 8 months, and I know that as a supporter of the camp industry, Camp Brain and their team have definitely listened to all of their clients in a way that really speaks to the trust and the relationship building that they're committed to. If you've ever been to a conference across North America, their team is always eager to get to know you and your team, in addition to providing you with outstanding software to help you manage your camp operation. So check out Camp Brain at campbrain.com or call them at 866-485-8885. Today, we are going to have a conversation about race, diversity, and the inclusion of people of color in the camp industry. As camp owners, this is an important issue to discuss and more pressing than ever in the wake of the death of George Floyd and the subsequent protests that have taken place not only in the United States, but around the world addressing anti-Black racism and the challenges facing all people of color. We believe there's a call to action for all camp owners to do what we can do to bring greater industry-wide attention to this vital issue. We are looking forward to talking with our guest today about his experience as a Black man in the camp industry and what he sees as our way forward.
All right, it is my privilege to be able to introduce our guest today, Howie. We have André Brewer with us. He is the director of Camp Lincoln for Boys in Lake Hubert, Minnesota. And André, welcome to our show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited just to share my insight into what's going on as a Black man here in the camp industry.
Awesome. Well, do you want to start? We always ask our guests to tell us a little bit about, how the camp dream transpired for them and how you are here with us now.
All right. So growing up, I grew up in little town, 45,000 people, Hopkinsville, Kentucky. So I'm a Southern boy, go Cats. I ended up going to camp through my church. I attended First Baptist Church, and through church, I attended various camps. And we also did a lot of mission trips and choir tours, and ended up going to camp in North Carolina at Ridgecrest. And then from there, once I got in high school, I was involved in sports, so I didn't really have the summers free. So then I headed off to college at DePauw University, a little D3 school in Greencastle, Indiana. And just so happened on my floor, we happened to have a dorm of all singles. So you had to sort of get out of your room in order to meet people. And on my floor was Ruggs Coat, and he and I bonded. He ended up dating one of my best friends from Hopkinsville. And the three of us, he convinced us to head off to this camp that he and his family had owned since the 1920s. So I went up to camp, flew to Minneapolis, drove up to camp with Ruggs, and I feel like the rest is history. I did 4 years of college. I stayed every summer. I'd come up, and then after college, I moved back to Kentucky to teach 4th and 5th grade. I was in elementary ed. major and a chemistry minor, which is crazy. I was pre-med, but didn't like biology when I got to college, so didn't do the pre-med route, but ended up going back to camp. And as a teacher, as you know, we had our summers off. And so I was able to come back to camp and started as a counselor in 1990, and then moved my way up head counselor. And then in 95, I was a division head, which is I sort of oversaw all the boys, the youngest boys at camp, like first grade to fifth grade, did that for 3 summers. And then Ruggs was asked by his dad to join full-time in 97. And then immediately started calling me. I was teaching in Louisville. Andre, you have to do this. And I'm like, absolutely not. I am not moving to the tundra. I live in the South. It's warm. There's no snow. And so he was relentless. He didn't stop asking me. He'd send me emails. So eventually I was in a master's program for educational leadership and found out that I could transfer to St. Thomas here in Minneapolis or St. Paul and still not lose any credit. And I too was able to do educational lead in my school district. So if I didn't like it, I could come back to Louisville and still teach. I may not be at the same school, but I would still have the opportunity to teach. So I was like, okay, it's sort of a win-win. If I don't like working full-time, I can always come back to Louisville and then keep going to camp in the summer. So I came that summer of 2000 full-time and have not looked back since. So I was really lucky that Ruggs and I lived on the same floor freshman year in Little Greencastle, Indiana.
That's cool. I haven't heard that story before. I didn't know Ruggs was so relentless. That's good to
Yeah.
know. I would not gather that from the times I met him, but you know,
Right.
it sounds
He's
like he's
pretty
kind of a
laid back.
bulldog. Yeah. Well, when he sees a good thing, apparently he goes after it. That's what it sounds like to me. Well, we are so excited that you could join us today. I wanted to get a little backstory on why I had asked you to do this, or I thought of you and Howie and I wanted to do this important episode, but I specifically remember meeting you at Coda for the first time. And after they have a president's reception and like a cocktail hour, and we were leaving and probably going to the next establishment after, just like any good socializing networking event. And
Yes.
I remember standing with you and a couple other individuals, and someone made a comment to me that felt very racist. And I think that this person is a good friend of yours, or was a good friend. And so sometimes it's hard to, discern, is this a friend? Is this their relationship? But I remember being struck and kind of taken aback and thought, oh my gosh, we're at a camp conference. People don't talk that way.
Yeah, what's going on?
What's going on? And I won't forget it. And it's kind of one of those things. I think it's Maya Angelou says, it's not, you don't remember what people say, they remember how you made them feel. And I just remember that feeling of, oh, I don't like that. Should I have said something? Should I not? And after reading, Bob Dittner's article in the ACA magazine, I was exhibiting passive racism because I didn't say something, but you also don't know if you should. But I thought of you right away when we wanted to do this episode, because I felt like, one, I remember that experience, but you obviously observe it like I do when you go to a camp conference. There are not many people of color. So knowing you're in my state and in northern Minnesota, which I grew up in and isn't the most welcoming always of people of color, you were a person that we wanted to talk to. So, our first question that we kind of wanted to ask you, Andre, is for you to tell us just what has your experience been like as a person of color in the camp industry?
So I would say it's been eye-opening. As I said, I grew up, I applaud my town. I talked to a lot of my friends recently with everything going on in the country, but we just feel super lucky that I went to various schools growing up. I went to public school, then private, and switched back to public. But when we went to public school, it was 60% Caucasian and 40% Black, brown, everyone else. So we just grew up in a town where we didn't really look at color. We were just all friends. Our church was mixed, our friend groups, it just didn't seem like an issue. So to go into camping, especially private camping, where even now I sit on, I work for a private independent camp, And when we go to conferences and there are no other people really of color at the conference, if so, they may be a staff member that's been brought to come to the sessions, but they are not at the position that I am currently at Lincoln and Hubert. So it's been pretty eye-opening. I know that I often, going to even up to northern Minnesota, Brainerd, as a counselor, it was pretty weird to be like, when we go out and stuff, to be like one of the only people. And I will say that it has gotten better. There's more diversity, all different, not just Black, but Native American and Latino, and there's a lot more people up there now than when I was there in 1990. But speaking back just to the camp industry, I feel like even as a staff member, there are not a lot of counselors. We go to mid-states and other conferences across the country, the national conference, and there just wouldn't be a lot of people. And often I would, I go to the national conference and look at the national board even for ACA and be like, well, there's no one up there that, for me, there's no one that's sort of showing me that, like, hey, maybe this is a career that you should do as a Black man. And so myself and Tommy Feldman, Jessica Pearson, Sam Steiger got together and sort of formed this young professionals organization that now they call EPIC. But we went to Peg and Marla and just said, hey, we don't see anyone, not only diversity as far as color, but we don't see young people on there. And we feel like we are the future for what the organization should be. So we were offered a seat at the table, if you will, to come to their meeting and sort of talk about what we observed. And then Marla Coleman and Peg allowed me to be then like a member of the board to fill someone else's position. So it was really good just to go through those steps of being sort of like, no one looks like me, to actually having a place at the table to sort of talk about life as a person of color and a younger person in the camp industry without a lot of people to look up to or go up to. I know that there's pioneers in camping and a lot of these organizations that already exist, but again, there were not a lot of people that looked like me at all in those organizations. So it was really hard. I feel fortunate enough just that, Sam Coate and his family was willing, to give me a chance and allow me to attend conferences and whatnot so that I could grow as a camp professional. But in terms of just me as a counselor, yeah, there was not a lot of diversity or color in the camp industry. And I still feel like it's gotten better. I mean, say since 90 to now, 30 years, it's gotten better, but I still feel like we could do more as an industry.
I'm curious, Andre, maybe just to take you back to those your college dorm discussions with is it Ruggs? I don't know him.
Yeah.
But yeah. So obviously you grew up locally, having camp experiences, and described as somewhat mixed and being and quite diverse to the extent that whatever your childhood could provide during those days growing up, how much, given those experiences, was there, a lot of thought that went in to really experience a new geographical section of the United States, to move to even as a counselor, to what extent was the topic of whatever inclusion that existed at your college and the friends you made, but you were now leaving not only your college community where you probably felt really comfortable, your home where you felt really comfortable, and now on the recommendation of your good friend to say, let's try something totally new. Where did the issue of, contemplating how different you might be in that environment play in making that decision in the first place? Did that enter into it at all?
Good, Howie. I think, and I may be jumping around in the answers, but it starts for me at home. I was just brought up in a home where we were taught, my mom and dad taught us that you really should focus on the person and not really the color, and then also that no one is ever going to be better than you, or you shouldn't act as if you are better than anyone else. And I think that just sort of carried me throughout. I did a lot of first, if you will. Like I was a cheerleader in high school, and I was one of the first male high school cheerleaders in my state, I believe, for sure, in my high school. And obviously the stuff that goes along, the ridicule that may come along with that, or the backlash, if you will, people talking about you. I think I just developed a tough, thick skin. I also played tennis, which back then there were not a lot of people of color playing high school tennis in Kentucky. And so I think by the time I got to DePauw, which had not, I think it had only graduated 150 people of color when I was a freshman, and my class had 100 people of color in it as a whole. So we got to DePauw and we're like, okay, we have potential here to really impact the community. So then I think when camp came as an option, when Ruggs offered it to myself and Libby, I wasn't really taken aback, because I felt like I'd been growing up and given the tools, both during high school and middle school, and also during that first year of college. I just felt like I had a pretty good foundation. I could handle myself growing up to the northern Minnesota for a summer.
Something that I thought about when you were talking, Andre, was when you had said, you were grown up and had those tools, and something that I thought about is trailblazer, especially RBG is on my mind. She's on my mind so much, but I think of her as a trailblazer. And to me, hearing you, I did cheerleading, no one else did cheerleading. I did tennis, all of those things to me says trailblazer. Does that feel to you, does that feel like a burden? Does that feel exhausting? Is that a role that you feel like you took for yourself? Or is that a role you feel like you've had to play? Like, does that feel exhausting? Is it exhilarating? How does that feel for you?
I believe it's maybe a mix. I think at times I found myself, probably more recently, like Kelly and Howie, I feel like I've just been, frustrated with just how some people in our world today treat other people, especially those of color, and have treated them since, for the last 400 plus years. So that, I think that part of it frustrates me. So I think that's the burden that comes onto me. But in terms of like in the camp industry, I just look at it as a great opportunity that I've been given by God, just to positively impact campers and staff in the best way I know how. I often tell Ruggs and Sam that whenever I feel like I am no longer vital or making a difference in the lives of the people in our camp, I feel like it's time to go. I'm never going to be someone that just sticks around because it's what you're supposed to do. Because I think like there's a time and place for everyone to do things, and when your ship has sailed, I'm okay to get on the ship and sail away and know that I've hopefully left the place a little bit better than when I got there.
I'm curious, Andre, when you reflected on your attendance at conferences, and it became quite apparent to you how the makeup of the attendees and just the reality, over many years of what your initial impression of the industry was and how it's progressing. Can you speak to sort of how you feel the industry has moved in a way that is welcoming and provides opportunities, and perhaps the way things have changed in terms of how education within conferences have allowed professionals in our industry to walk away with new tools to bring back to their settings. And I think we want to obviously acknowledge the fact that it's so gratifying to know that our industry as a whole works so hard at inclusion and welcoming, and we're lucky to be part of a naturally welcoming industry. But there are so many areas where we can do better.
Right.
Can you capture your own experience of how education industry wide or the things that have been highlighted have allowed us as camp professionals to do better in our own settings?
So I feel like most camps at the heart of their values value diversity, inclusion. I think camp is one of the best places where you can come and just be yourself. I know often boys and girls come to camp and they can just be themselves. They don't have to be whatever their friend group wants them to be or whatever is expected to be, even by their parents. Sometimes they can just be their normal, natural selves. And I think what's great about the camp conference is what I've seen is we've all taken, as the organizers of the conferences, people have taken a step back and said, we did such a great job during those 3 months of the summer. We probably should work now on what can we do throughout the year to make our staff and us as the directors, owners, whatnot, better at being inclusive ourselves. So I applaud just the growth I've seen in the fact that the quality of speakers that we have that speak on the various topics that used to be maybe taboo are now more prevalent. I think of just all types of diversity, not just color, but sexual orientation or gender, age, all those special needs, all of those topics that maybe were not as present in early 90s or mid 90s when I would go to conferences. Now those are topics that everyone is talking about. And I feel like even in the private camp industry where there hasn't been a lot of diversity at all as far as owners and camp directors, I feel like even our conferences have started to show, to sort of be, I say worldly, more aware as to what is happening around them and are making a conscious effort to educate themselves as to how to better welcome people of different backgrounds into their camp communities. I feel like camp has really, as an industry, has grown and has allowed itself to be more accepting and also knowledgeable that, they have neglected, if you will, some people over the past, but now it seems like they are working to try to better that and make camp an opportunity for more. And I think we realize, especially in the private camp industry, that diversity, if you will, of our country is changing. There's going to be more people that speak Spanish, than English here soon. And so we're going to have to figure out how to get people of color into camp if we want to still remain a viable source for kids going forward. And so cultures where camp is not a thing, we're all going to have to figure out how to do that if we want to maintain. Or what's going to happen is, especially in the private camp industry, we can't all want the same, we all are going to want the same kids, you're not going to be able to get them. So those camps, I feel like, that reach out and are able to diversify their camp communities, both in staff and campers, will probably be those that maintain and are here the next 25 to 50 years.
So talking more about a staff member and how, we can be a place that is welcoming. I want to hear a little bit before we go into what we can do as camp owners, is talk a little bit about your experience, if you're willing to share that with us. So can you start with telling us about what's been positive about a person of color in the camp industry and in your position and your job?
So I wrote down a lot of stuff, so I'll try to get through quickly. I feel like the best thing for me, I'm super extroverted, so it's always going to come down to me is the people and the relationships that are that I'm able to form with them, regardless of if they've been there forever or if they're a first year camper or staff member. So as a counselor, I was really interested in just meeting people and learning more about them. Also, selfishly, I am one that likes to challenge myself. So another positive experience of camp was that I experienced a lot of growth in myself. I was able to do things that I was not able to do before I went to camp. I pretty good speaker, but like standing up in front of a group of 400 people and talking and leading songs, those are all skills that were just enhanced by being at camp. I love the coaching aspect of being a director. Lucky enough that I get to oversee our oldest boys at camp. We call them LTs, or the leadership training program. So most of them will be seniors in high school in the fall. And so they live in a cabin, and they obviously work with the kids and the staff in those cabins, but I serve as their direct supervisor, if you will, and mentor them throughout their 6 weeks at camp. And I feel like, that's a definite positive. And dude, selfishly, I think a positive has been the travel. I enjoy travel. I'm always on the plane. Another part of my job is I get to fly around the country. Not so much recently, but I get to fly around and recruit the families to come to camp, and being able to see the campers and their staff members in their home communities and go to their soccer games or go to their family dinner. It's just been really eye-opening just to see how impactful camp has been to so many kids and youth today. So I would say those are probably the major positives that I've experienced. And then too, just being a man of color and being accepted, if you will, by so many different people. It was not, I would say it was not common probably when I first started, but now that, I've been there a long time, I feel like it's just sort of seen as the norm that, he's the camp director. He's supposed to be doing this thing. And I don't want to say that camp wasn't like that before I got there, but I just think as a country, it was probably not as normal for, the Black camp director to show up at your house and you would send your kids maybe to camp with us, which is sad to say, but that's just the reality of the world we live in.
Right, but kudos to you for changing that that perhaps image of the traditional camp director, if that's even a phrase we could use, because
Right.
I think that you've alluded to the fact just how the industry is changing for the better in ways that you forged sort of a foundation for. And I know the work that you're doing in the ACA has allowed, I know, many young people who are coming in the industry to be inspired about your journey. And I think this brings us to, perhaps, Andre, to reflect on some challenges, some things, you faced, whether they were obstacles or issues related to being a person of color, as you made your way to be such an established force in the industry. Like, are there some things that come to mind that you could share with us that give us a perspective on where we've come, but also maybe perhaps where we still need to go?
Yeah, I think like what I started with, just the industry as a whole, there was not a lot of people like me. And at first that was a slight deterrent, but again, given my upbringing, I was ready to sort of forge on. I think just for me personally, another negative, which is dealing with the fact that camp was really not a good fit for all. So, some people really, when they get there, you could tell like it's what they want to do. It's what they should be doing. They're going to be fit for it, but then other people come, and I'm speaking more to people of color. We've had counselors that show up and it's just not for them. And for me, that's tough just to see because it's been such a positive impact for me. I think the lifestyle of being a camp director is challenging, I think, for all people. But I tend to be, again, pretty extroverted. So living away from friends and family all summer can be tough. Not that my friends aren't at camp, but that is another piece of the puzzle. And I think for me too, working with people that just are as motivated or they don't seem as interested in, I don't want to say people steered clear of me because of my, color. And so they didn't really want to like engage with me sometimes at conferences just because like, who are you? Like, what are you doing? And then they maybe see where I work and then they may say, whoa, you work with this family. And so, oh, you work at these camps. So that was sort of disappointing to experience and sort of tough to sort of stomach. But in the end, I think what helped me get through is I had, a supportive group of people that were sort of, that started with me. I did the BCDC training when the national conference was in DC, I think in the early 2000s. And there was a really great group of first year camp directors that were there. And we've since, remained friends. And, we talked to, Tommy Feldman was one of the people I mentioned earlier. And we've remained friends all of these years. And I think it's because I had a good core group of people around me in the CODA organization, as well as just the ACA board, that I was able to stay on the path and to realize that this is something I really wanted to do for the good of myself and then also those that I would work with on a day-to-day basis.
Have you, Andre, received comments, I guess, either positive or negative, about being a person of color from parents, like going to go visit families? Have you heard, oh my gosh, I'm so happy to see a person of color coming to visit me from this camp, or the opposite, or from other staff members, either, saying to you, I feel there are people like me here. Have you heard that from staff and campers, or the opposite of racist comments?
Yeah, Kelly, I've probably done both sides. I think a lot of people have said, like, until they went to the website, they just assumed that I was a Caucasian male. And then they go to the website and they're like, whoa. And I've gone on the road and had families say specifically like, okay, we feel comfortable sending our son or daughter to those camps because you are one of the people in charge. I feel like I've also experienced that, like, the sort of uneasiness of when I'm there and meeting the kid and their parents, and they're like, whoa. I will say it's gotten better, but I would say initially, probably my first couple of years, there were still some families, and probably there still are, to be honest, there probably are some families that are like, wow, I can't believe the Coate family has someone of color, in charge of their camp that's been around this long. And I think what I get a sense of is because I've been here now, I think besides Ruggs and Sam, I'm the oldest person at the camp. And now now we have kids former campers who now send their kids, and I was there. So it's pretty much, they know me. So it's pretty comfortable for them to do. But yeah, I've seen both sides and felt both sides. Even when, families come and tour now, I think it sort of takes them aback. I claim to be a good read of people. So I get growing up obviously as a Black male, I know, like, that you're a little uneasy that I'm the person, because you didn't expect, that I would be the one giving your tour or being in this position at camp. So, but I think what encourages me is that where we are in 2020, although what's happening in the world today is not at all where I would want us to be. I think from where we've come in the camp industry, we've made great strides.
Yeah, so that actually brings me to getting your advice for our listeners and for Kelly and myself. Many of us have been very in tuned to what's happened over the summer with protests for anti-Black racism and the continued challenges of people of color in various communities across North America. And as a Canadian, I know it exists here as well. And and we've looked to ways, even locally to get better. Many of us are now back in our offices. reassembling our leadership teams to the extent that we can. And, we go through the process of how do we want to be better in 2021 and beyond. And as it relates to this topic, do you have any advice, of how camps could be, going through the exercise of maybe being introspective around their traditional approaches? Maybe what is the unspoken and the spoken issues that may be related to the feelings within the culture of their camps that we need to start talking about and addressing. And I think that so many of us are eager to do better if we're not doing well enough right now. And I'm curious, from an advice point of view, as we look at our internal workings of how we deal with certain traditions at camp in terms of activities or cultural things, or how we become even more diverse in terms of the makeup of our staff and how we recruit staff. I know we could probably talk for for a long time on all of that, but I think I really just wanted you to sort of maybe start a conversation, because there's no doubt we're having you back at some point.
All right.
But I was just curious about your advice to camp owners and directors around, how do you get started on this? Like, what do you suggest people start doing to address what is very much the kind of conversations we should be having?
So it may be tough, and I know that what we've done here is we've actually just sat down and talked a lot about what has gone on, what's going on in the world today, and how how it will impact camp going forward. Not only just life, but camp, because that's what we do. And I think it's having those tough conversations. Howie used a great word, introspective. You have to take a hard look at some of those traditions that you have went on for 100 summers, that maybe you take a look at it, maybe you shouldn't be doing it. Maybe some of your theme days may be offensive. Like, we've looked at, our camp colors. At one of the camps is green and white. So we have, a color wars day where there's green versus white. And so kids are chanting white, white, go white. And you're like, oh, that's granted, that's our color, camp colors. But for someone of color to hear someone chanting, white, 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 may not be the best environment for that person to be in. So it's actually having those conversations. And really, as I told Ruggs, it's almost like being super critical of what you currently do, and then being okay with saying, like, it's not okay to be doing that. And then it's talking, we're looking at even our training. There has to be some kind of session on just, we all do diversity and that kind of thing, sexual harassment, we do LGBTQ plus, most camps have those sessions, but it's now not the time to sort of do it to check a box. You have to allow people to really have those deep conversations during that time, so that people feel comfortable being in those, in your camp environment. So for me, it's all about having the conversations, and it should be everyone. I've challenged here, I think not only the camp directors and Ruggs as the owner, but I feel like his father and our staffing coordinator, everyone that works for the camp needs to be brought in, because even our person that answers our phones, should be in the know as to what the camp's take is on what's going on in the world. So I guess my advice is not to be afraid to ask questions. I did say, I think I told Kelly, I've really challenged our leadership here as a Black man. I don't want to be the spokesperson, nor should I don't want to be the champion, because I think it's expected. I know when this all happened, I was really pushy, if you will. I was frustrated with just what was going on. And I knew that there were Black campers that were probably looking for me to say something. There were also Black parents. We also have families that have adopted children of color that attend our camps. So all of those things were weighing on me. I'm like, we have to do something. And I shouldn't have to be the one, on my Instagram account saying, Camp Lincoln for boys, Camp Lincoln for girls. We, are not, we support Black Lives Matter, and we're not in favor of what's going on in the world today, what happened with George Floyd or Breonna Taylor. But it should probably come from the leadership, and I will help craft whatever needs to be happen, but it should be something that comes from us. So we were really energized, if you will, that the directors of both the camps as well as the ownership got together and worked on a statement. It was really invigorating, and we felt really good about doing that. So having those tough conversations, and it was great. Howie and Kelly, like, people didn't really know. I had so many people reach out to me that were former campers or staff members and just saying, like, Andre, like, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. What else? And I, responded, this is the best step you can do. It's just reaching out and talking and asking, what else can I be doing? So I think if we sort of take that as camp directors into our planning for 2021, and not be afraid and be okay with not knowing for sure what it's going to look like, and not getting hooked on the fact that this could go a certain way. It could go bad, or badly, I should say. But just by talking about it and making these conversations happen, I think you're just going to make your camp community that much more enriched, and the buy-in, I believe, especially from this generation of counselors, will be that much better, because they will know that you are knowledgeable as to what is going on in the world around you, and you're not under some rock, and you're willing to try to make the camp environment a better representation of what you maybe want the world to look like going forward.
And I would think that, I'm sitting here as a 50-something-year-old white male, and I could have my team together talk about what we may think the changes we need to make. I would think that, reaching out to alumni, former staff of color, getting information about their own experience, things we think may have gone well for them may just simply have been things that they just went along with because they weren't comfortable, or they didn't have an ally, on the team, or they don't have necessarily a strong Black man in leadership at their camp, and they look to people. Talk to us a little bit about your thoughts around, to the extent that you extend the circle on getting sort of a feel for what's really happening in your camp. We still, I think, us people who've been in camping for a long time, still feel we have our finger on the pulse of what's really happening, but we really have to go to the campers, and we really do have to go to the staff and maybe recent alumni to get a sense of what we may think is happening but really isn't. So maybe you can speak to your experience with, just that example of how you extend the circle of just getting maybe some raw data around what's happening, in your camp, your setting, et cetera, that could ultimately, promote really positive change and direction on how even more diverse and inclusive you can be.
So we do a lot of surveys, we call them evals, throughout the summer of both our staff and our campers, at the beginning of their experience, during the middle, and at the end. And then in between those times, we really challenge ourselves to read that information. And I always say, it helps if you write your name on it, because I'm more likely to be able to come up to you and be like, wow, you had a lot to say about this topic. Can I pick your brain more? And I feel like it has been beneficial to us, because people, if they're behind a pen, they're able to just write and say what they really believe, and they may not do that to your face. But we really try to work on making the community more one of openness and sharing. We do a lot of small groups amongst our big staff. We have about 125 staff at Camp Lincoln, but we meet as a staff group and group half of that, and then we make those groups even smaller and just talking about all of these different various topics that are abound today in the world, I think just lets them see you as human, and maybe change their mindset, or they may change yours as to what should be happening at camp. So it's not, I think for me, it's just not being so set on that in your ways that what you do and what you've done is the best practice currently. Because, you know, a 21-year-old or a 19-year-old or even a 12-year-old may have insight that you just didn't think about, or an experience that you have not experienced, and could change your world, if you will, and change what happens at camp. So again, it's just those tough conversations, and maybe you call your session something like that. You have you do a topic on the diversity and racism. We've even gone as far enough as just to say we're going to discuss racism because it's prevalent in the world today, and right now it's happening primarily to Black men and women. And you know, who's to say in 5 years it could be another race that is experiencing the same thing? So why not take this opportunity to educate your community about what it is and what it looks like and how we can eradicate it now, regardless of what color of the person that it's happening to. Why not do that? Because it's just going to make, in my world, it's just going to make your campers and your staff people, as well as your leadership, that much better at what they do. They're just going to be better people, and that's my opinion. That's what we need. We just need better, wholesome people in the world today.
That sounds like the perfect ACA camp conference session is how to run your session at staff training on diversity and racism. How to talk about racism, about it. And literally someone should role model how we can do that really well. So if anyone's listening can do that, I think that would be
fantastic.
Excellent. That'd be excellent. Andre, I think submit it. I feel like they still have proposals are open. So, you know, or someone you know. You know, something that I heard you say brought me to the thought that, you know, this isn't, it's many layered, it's multi-layered, it's many steps. It's not just, you know, having people of color on our staff. Like when I heard you say about ACA, I don't know if you said it on purpose, but you said people for me. There was no people for me there. And I don't know if that's similar to people like me, but it was basically people for me that represent who I am. But it's not just that as camp owners. It's not just hiring people of color. It's, you know, Bob Dittner says in his article, even if you were to find people of color, it's not clear that they would feel welcome or stay if you invited them to your camp. Would there be, for example, other people there who looked like them? Would there be awareness cultivated through willingness and openness to know of how we often slight people of color in ways we are sometimes oblivious to? So it's like that next step then as camp owners is looking at our programming, like you talked about the color wars and really having that hard reflection. I know for me, this would have been the 5th summer that we would have ran our camp, but you know, year 1, you're just doing it just to survive. Like, let's just not let this place burn down and I don't ruin it. But year 2, I remember we did this game at our staff overnight because we do it overnight for staff. Like, let's practice what this will look like with kids. And they're like, hey, we're going to play a game called Underground Railroad. I'm like, okay, first year, like, yeah, I'm learning everything. Let's do it. And then year 2, I was like, wait a minute. Okay, so we're like sending people out to hide in the woods. And then the people with flashlights are going to go find them and bring them back to jail. I was like, oh, wait a minute, Kelly. But it took me till year 3 to be like, no, we can play a game like this, but we're going to call it Tomb Raider. Like, we're going to go find the hidden people in the tomb and jewels. But it takes courage and it's scary, and to change it. And it's still, even, you know, 2 years after changing the name, they'll be like, let's play Underground Railroad. I'm like, Tomb Raider. It's Tomb Raider. Yeah. Here's why. Like, it takes time. And then what I noticed is like our older leaders in training on their overnight wanted to play it. And then it takes the staff. It's like, then that next layer, like not just you, it's your staff then. Like, no campers, it's Tomb Raider. We call it Tomb Raider, and here's why. But it seems
especially
like
those longtime people.
Yes.
Like if the staff were campers, then you have to like get them. But the older campers are like, well, Andre, this is what's always been called. And we're like, well, not anymore. You're just changing everything. You know, they get all out. But then hopefully, if you can educate them as to why, and I think that's what people need to remember. Like, it's not enough just to say we support diversity at camp, or we're inclusive, yay. But you got, there's a lot more work, and I feel like we have a lot more work to do as an industry still. But as I said, we've made leaps and bounds from when I began in 1990 to where we are now, but we just have more work to do.
I think my favorite thing that I heard you say, and I don't know how if you would agree with this, but you said we should make camp what you want the world to look like.
Yeah.
And that was profound for me. I love that. I think if that's your why and that's your mission, like you can't go wrong. Like if that's what you want, just make your camp what you want the world to look like, and it'll spread. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, just so many things in the culture of camp that we want to change that sometimes get resistance, and just resistance for the sake of resistance because it's always been done this way. And the importance of us is at our core as camp people, we are educators. And the more that we can explain why and get that buy-in, it doesn't necessarily happen overnight, but we keep at it, and good things often result. And at a time where people are hurting in so many different ways in 2020, I think I'd like to think that when we all return to whatever normal looks like at camp in the future, we can all take a pause, and just the things that got us excited or bothered in the past may now just become just less important when we think of how camp should operate. Firstly, in the most safe and healthy way, and secondly, that people can come together and just benefit what this great experience provides. So I think all of this has been incredibly impactful. And Andre, for me personally, just to get to see you, because we're on a Zoom call, but hear your journey and your experience is really helpful. I really do look forward to meeting you in person at a future conference, and you can come a little further north and visit it. Although I have to be honest, Andre, I always tell Kelly that Toronto is technically more south than parts of Minnesota that she's in. So I'm just—
That is true. That is true.
That I'm in Southern Ontario, but that's another story. It's really at that time in our podcast where we move to a part of our show where we close with inspiration, things that, is inspiring us right now. It could be a book, an article, a podcast, a documentary, a leadership quote, or anything else that inspires us to be better camp professionals. And I'm going to turn to Kelly first so she can get, us started on her latest inspiration, and then she can turn it over to Andre, and then I'll finish up with the inspiration I want to share.
All right, well, I'm going to diversify, Howie, and this time I'm not going with a book for the first time ever, but in the spirit of RBG and her honor and, talking about dissenting, this quote really sticks out for me also in this conversation, but just in her honor of dissents speak to a future age. It's not simply to say my colleagues are wrong and I would do it this way, but the greatest dissents do become court opinions, and gradually over time, their views become the dominant view. So that's the dissenter's hope, that they are writing not for today, but for tomorrow. And I think that inspires me in this conversation about diversity and race, that we can dissent what's happening, and not for us, but for tomorrow. So that's my inspiration.
Awesome. Andre, your thoughts? That's great, Kelly.
Good. So I did a mixture of things. First of all, probably my greatest hero in my life, and she inspires me every day, is my mom, Kari Brewer. If she watches this, that'd be awesome. She is 93, still living in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. And given everything that's gone in the world, she's inspired me because I feel like she really taught me just to look at people for people. And again, if everyone could just do that daily and not really look at their color or their religion or who they love or anything like that, it would just make the place so much better. So kudos to my mom for being way ahead of the game and teaching me and my siblings that valuable piece of information. And two, I'm inspired. I was sharing with both Kelly and Howie before we went live that the American Camp Association is taking diversity, equity, inclusion very seriously, so much so that they created a steering committee to look at those topics in their organization as well as the camps, but their camp directors, owners, staff, and campers. So it's really inspiring to me that an organization that's near and dear to me and to so many of us, those of us listening is willing to say, hey, we have some things to learn still, even after being in existence for 150 years. We have some things to learn. So it's really inspiring to me that the American Camp Association is going to sort of put their resources towards educating our industry as to the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Well, we couldn't imagine a better person along with that group than you, Andre, to provide leadership for that. And best of luck. And we look forward to updates on at various conferences and communication on how all that is going. So thanks for sharing that. My inspiration is bringing everyone's attention to a podcast. After you listen to our podcast, feel free to go onto this podcast, but make sure you subscribe to ours. I want to share with you a podcast that I'm listening to called Heroic Minds with Ben Finelli. This was brought to my attention by my 25-year-old son, Cole, who brought this, the work that Ben is doing. Ben is a former hockey player whose professional dreams got cut short due to a devastating concussion. It's very much close to my heart because my son Cole, who was a varsity athlete in the sport of volleyball at his college, in his very first start of his career, suffered a career-ending concussion himself. And his podcast, Ben, is very much about overcoming adversity and transforming into something better. And I think that whether it be coming back from a devastating injury or changing the way you behave in the world, etc. This podcast provides a lot of great examples. Just like you, Andre, coaching is very near and dear to my heart. So there are a lot of good sport examples, but there are also a lot of really good, genuine stories about people overcoming adversity and how it's transformed them into contributing to their communities in much more positive ways than just what has happened to them. So something that was near and dear to me, and I wanted to share it all with you. So I'm glad you started with your mom, the hero, and I could throw in the Heroic Minds plug. So way to go. That was awesome.
We didn't even plan it.
Didn't even plan it, exactly.
All right. So Andre, if people want to get a hold of you after this podcast, what is the best way for them to reach you?
All right. So really easy email address. It's all lowercase, Andre, ANDRE, at camplincoln.com.
All right. And that will be in our show notes. If people want to get a hold of me, it's Kelly with a Y at hiddenpinesranch.com. What about you, Howie?
If you want to get a hold of me, it's Howie, HOWIE, at camprobinhood.ca.
All right. So don't forget that you can find all of our show notes at gocamp.pro/COP. You can find the resources that we mentioned in this episode and lots of good stuff there from our show and other Go Camp Pro podcasts out there. We hope you enjoyed this, and thanks for listening, everyone.